Okay, I'd like to bring this meeting to order. The Villa Park Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting, September 9th, 2024. Clerk Kornecki, please call the roll.
Trustee Alfano. Here. Trustee Cordova.
Here.
Trustee Corkery. Trustee Kozar.
Here.
Trustee Kumar. Trustee Patrick.
Here.
President Kazone.
Here. And if we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, tonight's committee of the whole meeting is regarding Sugar Creek Golf Course, and I will turn it over to Manager Harline.
Just want to do a quick introduction of the topic, and then I'll introduce Mr. Rogers from the Elmhurst Park District and our partner on the board with our partner with the management of the Sugar Creek Golf Course. We talked about this last fall, and as we're getting ready for the budget process, I thought it would be a good time to revisit it. There is wanted to look at the options moving forward about the balance created by investment made by the two golf course owners, both the Village of Villa Park and the Elmhurst Park District. As of right now, those investments, and they are, we included 2 pages from the last audit of the golf course, and on the second of those 2 pages from the audit highlights that the balance on December 31, 2023 showed that the investments specific to the golf course from the Elmhurst Park District had grown from $1,351,763 to $1,420,706, and the Village of Villa Park's investments were $584, had gone from $584,952 to $614,786. These are on a straight line interest asset basis. One of the things to consider for discussion tonight is whether or not we want to freeze that accumulation of interest, or basically forego any additional interest, because that is essentially I mean, if you look at it as a loan, it wasn't really formally made into a loan, and that just increases that cost burden. Also, from the Village of Villa Park standpoint, last year the amount for Elmhurst Park District grew by just under $69,000, and for us just under $30,000. Well, the current financial, the last budget passed by the golf course agreed to pay $50,000 back on that loan to both parties. At that rate, the Village of Villa Park's amount will be diminished slightly every year, but the amount that's being owed to the Elmhurst Park District, we're not even covering the amount of interest. So it seems to make sense, especially for Villa Park, to hold that. That amount owed is based on projects that were paid for by both parties, and there are different options on how to eventually settle that, and some of those we'll discuss tonight. Finally, the golf course is, as I think everybody knows, run as a cooperative venture between the two entities. There's a 7-member board. It alternates 3 members by the village and 3 members by the Park District, with 1 member. Each entity gets the 7th member in alternating year, and the one who doesn't have the 4th member gets to name the chair. So we have that kind of cooperative relationship. Over the years, there's been a whole bunch of stuff that has come up. I think we've addressed the problems that we had with a sense that we were not aware of what was going on with the management. Now, remember, we've always had 3 or 4 members on that board, but we weren't pressing, and then we weren't getting the village, I think, felt that we weren't getting all the information that we'd like, but, again, we had members on that board that, but I think at this point, we have a pretty good cooperative relationship. I know that currently our members on the board, and I'm going to miss one of them, are our finance director, Chuck Howard, Parks Director, Greg Gola, and I'm forgetting who the third member is. Joe Camone. So those are currently our three members. And then, so that's where we're at. Well, one of the decisions to be made as we go into next budget year for ourselves, for the Park District, and for the golf course is, do we want to continue to have those payments made versus putting more money into some capital projects? And if you remember last year, they submitted a capital projects, a list of capital projects, among which is a refurbishing of the maintenance shed. The maintenance shed is getting in pretty bad condition and will probably require some kind of short-term borrow, some kind of loan or medium-term loan to front the money to do the repairs. And I'll leave that up to Greg and Jim to describe those details more. But that's kind of where we're at, trying to figure as we go through the budget year what we want to do to proceed. So without any further ado, I'll let Jim Rogers from the Elmhurst Park District, who is the managing partner of the golf course.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you being here. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having us out. It's great opportunity to be here to talk cooperatively as partners about this opportunity that Matt has described. I think he's done a good job of kind of laying out where we're at with things, and the idea being, as Matt had described, that there's a couple of things to be thinking about here. Is, do we want to consider continuing to charge ourselves interest on the loans that were made to the golf course? Do we want to look at, as Matt was talking about, that annual repayment? And if both those things happen, the challenge is that it just continues to put the golf course in a difficult and challenging spot financially when it's in very good shape right now. You've seen that. I saw in the materials that you were provided with page, I think it was page 5 from the audit, with the statement of net position, which, as you can see, last number of years the golf course has done very well financially. So it's not an issue of not being in good shape financially anymore. There were those circumstances in years past, but it's more the notion right now of wanting to give our golf course the best opportunity to succeed. And so looking and considering whether or not those interest payments apply, repayment applies, or if there's another way to skin that cat. So as Matt had said, you all had a conversation earlier this year. Our park board did as well. As we have been continuing to have conversations about it, and I should have mentioned when I started, actually, I'm joined by Barbara Stemmridge, our Director of Finance. Barbara and I were discussing this just a couple of days ago, and we realized that when we've been talking about this earlier, we'd been using the term forgiveness of the loan or the debt, and obviously that concept being, you say, don't worry about it, you don't have to pay us back. Understandably, there's been some hesitancy on the part of elected officials, both I think here at the village, and I can speak on behalf of our meetings at the park board as well, some hesitancy there. So looking at other options, and Barbara, as we've been digging into it, came upon what we believe is a better financial term to describe this, and I hope Chuck will agree with this as well. It's the term forbearance, which is, it's not forgiveness, it's the postponement of repayment of the debt in any type of financial situation. Chuck, have I gotten that? Am I using the right definition there? Okay, thank you. Good. Barbara, I'm good? Okay. Check with the finance folks, right? But the idea being here that is there another way, a different way for us as partners to address our golf course as it currently operates, but also be mindful of the fact that the taxpayers of our communities have loaned those dollars and have a reasonable expectation at some point to be repaid. So the idea that's being considered right now, or being put out for consideration right now, would be that we freeze the current debt amounts where they sit at X date. It could be the December 31st. It could be tomorrow if we decided to use that date and calculate interest. But the idea being that we do an addendum to our intergovernmental agreement that freezes those amounts and stops accruing interest on them, and agree that each of our entities would get repaid the amount that they are owed at such time in the future if the golf course property were to be sold, if ever. So whether that's 32 years or 74 years, whatever that might be, if it ever happens, that those dollars are still accounted for on the books so that all of the elected officials can be accountable to the taxpayers and say, we're not forgiving this debt, we're just saying it can, if it's to be repaid, or it can be repaid at such time as that asset is basically sold or liquidated. So that's the concept that's I think, Matt, if I'm saying this right, kind of being presented for consideration in the way I understand, if I do correctly, committee of the whole, you're here tonight to discuss. I would need to go back to my board and discuss it with them as well. My board discussed it back in January, and at that point in time, we were talking about 2 or 3 different ideas, and this was one that was put out, but they didn't really have a full discussion of it. But I think that's the idea that we're kicking around, and to Matt's point, so that we can continue to care for the golf course today, meaning equipment replacement, meaning replacement and upkeep of cart paths and the bridges over the creek and things like that. And then also look at, as Matt said, the maintenance facility there, which is in significant need of being addressed. We're proposing, Greg and I were just chatting a minute ago, we're proposing, it's being proposed, I should say. And when I say we, please understand, when I say we tonight, I'm talking about we, all of us, not we, the Elmhurst Park District, we, Sugar Creek Golf Course. We're proposing to put some dollars in the golf course budget for 2025 to start to look at doing some engineering as regards the maintenance facility to determine what actually is needed, where could it be built. Hopefully you're all familiar with where it is there on Villa, very tight to the creek, obviously, was built in a different day and time, so lots to figure out about what's even feasible about that. But those are kind of the ideas that are out there, I think, for consideration. Matt, I would ask you, have I kind of hit on the high points?
Yeah, I think, and just to be more specific, in the handout on page 2 of our packet, the page which shows the page 5 from the audit of the golf course for the fiscal year that ends December 1, 2023, there was a net positive change in position of $544,000, $544,000 essentially, last year and the year before of a 582. Now there were years, particularly back in between 2000 and 2010, when those numbers were very small or negative, and there were times when this golf course was was not making money. The last few years, it has been making money. They've increased the net position. There's a little bit of cash on hand. I don't know what, and you know, there are a bunch of questions we could ask and get into details about, you know, where do we want to set that final net position but what we know is we can afford right now to do the $50,000 a year, but it sort of just pushes the amount of capital investment that we can do down the road slightly, and it isn't, if we're charging ourselves more interest than we're paying back, then we need to take another approach to that anyway. So that approach doesn't seem to make sense to me financially. So that's kind of where we're at. We're trying to come up with a strategy where they can do planning and know what is going to be expected. Last year, we are to be paid $50,000 each this year. The 2 owners, that is the Park District and the Village, and that's where we're at this point.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Trustee Patrick.
Thank you. I've got just a couple of questions and then a request from the village manager. First of all, Manager Harlan, I'd like to have a copy of the original IGA between Villa Park and Elmhurst. And then my questions, I guess, for anybody. First of all, does the golf course have a comprehensive or a strategic plan for the course? And then also, do we know what the current net value or the net worth of the golf course is? If we were to put a dollar amount on that, if we were going to sell that, what would that be?
The golf course itself, to try to answer both your questions, does not have a current strategic plan. We've got capital replacement plan schedule, both primarily for equipment. Well, not for equipment, as I said, equipment, the grounds of the course itself, the the facilities on the course, but not a specific strategic plan for the golf course. And then your second question was around, I'm sorry, refresh me.
What's the net value?
Oh, net value, don't have that. It has been, no, we have not had that property appraised in,
Any estimates, ballpark figures?
I don't, honestly, I don't. What I can tell you, though, what I do know about the, not the financial value, but the value from a development perspective is that many, many years ago, 11, 12 years ago, we were approached by a developer who said, oh, I'd like to buy the golf course and consider development. And one of the things that was challenging, I was just saying this to Greg actually in the hallway, is that there is very little property on that course that could be built upon because of the floodway and the floodplain. And it's primarily up at the, or down at the south end along Van Buren there, where there already are the, the clubhouse and the built structures there. So when this developer had approached us, again, a long time ago, they were just kind of one of those out of the blue. They're a regional real estate developer and said, oh, would you ever sell the golf course? We're interested in buying it. And what they were proposing was a shockingly low amount given the acreage, because you're talking about 45 acres. But honestly, there might be, there might be 10 acres maybe, and I'm guessing, but there's not very much buildable land out there. Everything, I'd say north of probably, and again, I'm not an engineer, I'm just going off of what I remember from this conversation, but, north of the greens on 9 is probably unbuildable, where it starts to slope down and go towards the creek. So it's a lot of acres, but there's not a lot that's buildable.
So you said that there's no strategic plan, but you said that there is a maintenance plan?
Yeah, capital repair and replacement plan, yes, and certainly a copy of that could be provided too.
So that's already been completed?
It exists, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
and if I could get a copy of
Sure.
that as well, thank you.
Matt, I'm just sorry, I'm so sorry. Are you jotting those couple down, requests down? Okay, great, I won't
And,
take notes at the
the
moment.
last time I searched for a copy of the IGA, I mean, I meant to do this week, and it got away last week and got away from me. We have got a very cobbled together copy, so
We
need
can,
to-
they're 1975 vintage, so they're going to look cobbled together kind of no matter what you look at, but we can get something
Yeah, I
for
think
sure.
that's yeah.
Good. Trustee Kozar.
So, last year in '23, you're showing on changes in net position of 543. So are you saying that's profit?
No, change in net position is different than profit. I might even ask Chuck, would you want to take a stab at describing change in net position versus profit for a year? I just meant like conceptually.
Well, changes in net position is just cash on hand?
I believe it's, am I correct, Chuck, that it's cash, it's, take a better stab at this than I.
Yeah, net position is, I guess in old terms, it's a balance sheet kind of accounting, and it's the change, it takes in profit and the value of the assets and the value of the liabilities, and that's what the net position is. So whatever those changes are accounted. If you want to look at net activities, if you want to look at some measure of activity for a particular period, then I would look there, but that's essentially what the net position would do.
And I guess if I might, one other thing perhaps to draw your eyes to would be on that page 5, about halfway down the operating income loss, where you see the actual in 2023 was 306.8. That's probably the closest thing to profit that you'd talk about, operating revenues versus operating expenditures. Because it's an enterprise fund, it also accounts for depreciation, which is that $201,130. So that might be, and Trustee
on
Kozar, I'm sorry, I didn't think to
page
say that
5?
at first, but,
It's the second page on ours.
sorry, I'm sorry. It's labeled 5 from the golf course
Yeah,
audit.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's page 2. So start over again with what
Sure,
you're saying?
sure. So what you had first asked about is at the bottom of that page, which is the changes in net position, but then halfway down the page, you see operating income and loss, and in the 2023 actual is 306,802. So from a pure operating perspective, that would be your quote-unquote profit. Year before was 241.
It would be more like just a gross profit.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think that's probably
Yep.
the right way to say it.
It's, yeah, operating expenses, revenues minus expenses, essentially.
Okay, do we have a number for what the actual net profit on this enterprise is, on this golf course is?
Well, the best that any of us could say is what's here in the audit.
I mean,
Okay, but, so are we saying the operating income is what the profit for the golf course is?
Yes, in 2023, yes.
Okay,
Revenues over expenses, but also including the charges for depreciation. So in 2023, the golf course brought in a little over 1.28 million, and its expenses were a little under 974.
plus charges for depreciation.
Right, and including the charges for depreciation, right, which gets you to the 970, almost 974.
so, and there's also an investment, grant income in capital, which, you know, because of the project there with the stream, you know, the,
Creek restoration.
thank you,
Yep.
the creek
Yep, no problem.
restoration. So
Yep.
that adds some value to the but yeah, the best number for operating minus expenses would probably be the 306,802.
So the question is kind of like, how's the golf course been doing the last couple of years? It would be that operating income.
Okay. What is non-operating income?
I think you're talking about the non-operating revenue there below the operating income, so things like grant income, amortization, interest expense, things like that. So, for example, over the 22 and 23 years, you see that the grant income was considerable because we had received that $600,000 grant for the project, plus more than $600,000 in grants for the project. So that's the 293,267 in 2022 and the 362,06 in 2023. Whereas in most years, there really isn't much non-operating revenue at the operation. One other interesting note you might notice is in 2022, that gain sale on loss of assets, that 116,069, that was on the sale of the house that the golf course used to own adjacent to the parking lot there.
Where is that? In the 23?
In the 2022,
In the 22?
under non-operating income, the third item, gain loss on sale of assets, if you go over to the right in the 2022.
116?
Yeah, 116,069, yeah.
Who are most of the customers that are using this golf course? Are they Elmhurst residents, Villa Park residents? Are you tracking that?
I believe the staff is, I don't know that off the top of my head. I would imagine, just given the populations of the two communities, it probably leans towards Elmhurst residents, but I do know that, you know, a good portion.
You do have records on that?
I'd have to check with the staff to see if they, and Greg, do you even know, does, not 4Golf, yeah, the 4Golf, does it track?
Yeah, the Golf Now,
Golf Now?
I don't believe it.
Okay.
It tracks the, where the residents come from. They just pay their for green fees. I think previously,
Yeah.
because we had people coming in, the residents coming in for season passes. We don't do the season passes
Right.
anymore.
Because it's all
Because
purchasing
of
online.
the new registration or tee time
But this
reservation
is
system.
run by the Park District essentially, right? This is,
No, well, no, to clarify, so it's an equal partnership between the two entities.
right.
And then we are the administrative partner, so we do accounts payables, accounts receivables, payroll, that kind of thing for the golf course, but fully a joint partnership between the two.
But Sugar Creek is more of a public entity than it is a private entity. Wouldn't that be an accurate
Yes,
statement?
oh, it's definitely a
Okay.
public asset, public golf course, yeah.
So, I mean, I feel if I'm going to be asked, does Villa Park and its residents want their money back that they loaned to the golf course? I'd like to know who's using the golf course. I mean, are we benefiting the Villa Park residents or the Elmhurst residents, or are we forgiving a loan, or any sort of semantical terms you want to use on it? Are we benefiting Oak Brook? Are we benefiting Addison? Like, who are we benefiting with the Villa Park money?
Sure.
So on a moving forward basis, how do we get that tracked? Anybody who uses the golf course should declare where they're from. I mean, it, kind of a simple question for them, right? Where are you from? Are you Villa Park? Are you Elmhurst? Where are you coming from? You're at a public course.
don't disagree with your concept. I think the challenge nowadays is the fact that most of the bookings are done online through a mobile app where people are, using their debit card.
That's not something we can tag to the mobile app?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I'd have to find out. I'm not sure.
It's a third party.
Yeah, it's definitely a third-party vendor. I don't know,
Sure.
and I don't know, the
I would think there
cellular
would be a way to
technology,
track it.
the
I
app
mean-
technology. I'm not sure if it tracks,
Shaking your head?
Yeah, so it's PII, which is personal identifiers. You just can't get that. It'd be like asking Grubhub, like, hey, who's buying my stuff? You don't get it.
Well, I think, and the problem too is, I sign up for a foursome, I'm from Villa Park, but, I may have friends from, Oak Brook that are coming in, or, so it's just, because you don't put your name, you just put your name down for a foursome. And then you may, like, when people come in, maybe ask them, when they're teeing off or something, but.
So at the new rec center that we're building here, we're not going to have any idea who's using it, if it's Villa Park residents or somebody else from out of town?
No, we'll have that information for recreation software.
Okay.
Yep.
So why
Because-
couldn't we have that for the golf
Well,
course?
because the golf course is on a different, it's Golf Now or whatever program that they use. We will take memberships. We request the address because we do charge non-resident charges for anybody outside the village. So we have that information when they fill out their registration forms. Everybody fills out their address, and we have to prove, or they have to prove residency in order to get the resident rates. So we have that information, but it's different than, even online, when they register through our system, they'll put in their address. Golf is totally different. They'll just pay for a credit card. But we can certainly ask when they come in, is like, hey, are you residents? Where are you from? It might be a little more cumbersome on the staff to do that, but it's probably the best way to do it.
I just don't know if I can accept that answer, that there's no way to track where your customers are from. I mean, I understand that-
You can't track from the website by signing up. The only way to do it would be in person.
I mean, I suppose we could look
I'm not
at-
asking for retrospectively. If you're not tracking it up to this point, there's no data on it.
If we're not.
Right, but on a moving forward basis, if that's an item of information that you want, I can't imagine there's not a vendor out there, or the current vendor can't put something on their app or that to identify where you're from. I mean, why are we giving money if we don't know who's benefiting for it? Our job here is to benefit the people of Villa Park. So how do I know I'm benefiting the people of Villa Park?
Sure.
So can you come back to us by the next meeting and tell us if that's something that your vendor can track on a moving forward basis?
If I could, trustee Kozar, if I just clarify, can we come back? It's not the park district, it's us as the golf course.
Anybody.
working part.
I
Right.
don't care who comes.
Yeah, we'd have to find out from the vendor if there's a way to track that. But to President Cassone's point, whether or not their software allows/requires that someone doing purchasing an online T10 give an address or give the town. I mean, Greg, you golf a lot. I don't golf a lot. I think with online
So,
purchasing now of tee times, that it's basically, I want this tee time and here's my credit card, and I don't even think information, I don't even think they ask you
just
your
take your
name or
credit
anything.
but as everybody's aware, I used to own a business in town, Fuel, and I use Square as my point of sale. And every night, every week, every month, whenever I wanted it, I could just pull up, where are all my credit cards coming from? Who are my customers? I knew what percentage of my customers were from Elmhurst.
Sure,
or
and we
from
might be
Villa
able to
Park.
find that out. Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe it'll run credit cards with location, perhaps?
Which is the only way to pay online, right?
Right, yes, yeah, but just a
So we're gonna get pretty close to it. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
think
if
you
it'll
would
do
set
it,
much
yeah, we
cash
can
there
certainly find
if
out.
everybody's booking online.
Yep,
Okay.
yeah, we can see if it does that.
So what would be a reasonable amount of time to come back to the board and give us that information? There would be two pieces of information.
Yeah.
One, are you able to track it? And number two, if you are able to track it, what have you learned so far?
Yeah, we should be able to get that shortly and get it to Matt, and he can provide it to the board. That shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
I mean, basically, you're getting the zip codes of the credit card
Credit
of
card,
the
yeah.
person who's using it, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah, right? That's, I mean, that's what
Yeah,
you're,
which,
that's
again,
what you're getting.
That's what we
It
did
could
with
be-
our POS, and
Right,
Yeah.
right.
it was, I mean, pretty spot on. We knew who was coming to our property and who was
Or
spending the money.
whose credit card. Again, here, if I book a tea time with my company credit card, it'll come up as a Chicago, because my company credit card is Chicago. So I have a foursome, I could have 3 people from Villa Park, 4 people from Villa Park, but it's gonna show Chicago, you know, so it's just,
But if you're using your company credit card, then we're benefiting your company, and your
Yeah.
company is Chicago or wherever it is.
Correct.
Right? If you are a Villa Park resident and you want to bring 3 out-of-town guests to play golf, well, that's a great asset to you because, you know, this is one of the nice things that Villa Park provides is a place to go play golf. So that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need the minutia of every detail of
Yeah,
it, but
yeah,
I think
we'll see if it can.
just by tracking that, we'll have 90% of the information we're looking at. So we're not making any decisions tonight, right? We're just generally talking about
Correct.
waiving this interest or not waiving this interest.
Correct. I
When
mean,
does
these
it
are
come-
decisions to be made through the budget process, and I want you to be aware of what, yeah, so no, we don't expect to have a final decision tonight. But, you know, again, we also, it was promised that would be brought back to you. I'll get you I think I sent out the IGA, I don't know that there's a better copy, but I'll send out the one that we have from 1975. We'll get you the amount of, and I don't know how far, if we can get some retro data on the credit card data on the golf course, at least as in terms of the zip code of the people who are paying it, which is going to be a pretty good approximation of who's using it. So yeah, we can get you that information.
So part of what we're calling profit, which is more of a gross profit operating income, right? It's not, I mean, it's operating income, it's not profit. So there's still other things that you tack on after operating income. But we're saying it's 306, and that's different from what was budgeted. And a big part of that was, there's no entry here for capital purchases,
Right.
right? So is that deferred maintenance, or does the golf course just not need anything?
No, the difference there, when you look at that under the operating expenses, and this is because it's an enterprise, it's budgeted and accounted for and audited as an enterprise fund, meaning it's intended to make a profit, so it operates differently than a governmental fund, because there's no tax support. So that's why it's an enterprise fund. And with an enterprise fund, you have to budget to show what you intend to spend on capital, so that you are accountable for what's intended to happen, whereas you don't budget appreciation. But then when you close out the year through your audit, you don't show your capital as an operating expense, but you instead show the depreciation of the assets. And I'm going to ask Barbara, did I do a pretty good job of explaining that? Okay. An
Okay.
auditor could do a better job than I could, but in simplest terms, you budget capital and you expense at the end of the year depreciation.
So you made capital purchases.
Correct.
You're just not attributing all that to 2023.
Exactly. And the reason
Spreading
why
out the
that's so
cost
much
there.
that year is because of the wrap-up of the creek restoration project.
So what, just give us a scope on the maintenance shed. If I recall correctly, when we were going through this last year, there was sort of a rough estimate of somewhere in the neighborhood, and I may be off by a factor of 20%, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million needed pre-engineering to repair and or replace that maintenance shed.
Sure.
So, and I mean, one of the biggest things is where can we actually put it to?
Right, right, and that's the first question, that's why the engineering would be so critical, but you're correct, it was something along the order of $1 million, but that is very much a very conceptual kind of number. We had at the Park District, we did an indoor study of our facilities a number of years back, and we chose to include the maintenance facility at the golf course as part of that, kind of an analysis of each facility, its age, its condition, and so on and so forth, and we manage about 23 facilities, and then there's also this maintenance facility, and just for what it's worth, by an outside architectural and engineering firm, not by Park District staff or anything like that. And it was the lowest rated facility in all respects, accessibility, condition, age, functionality. it has really seen. So, Matt, I was even hesitating when you were describing before. We don't believe there's really an option to refurbish. It really likely needs to be replaced.
So just the last thing I'd like to see too is a current P&L, not just the net position statement of revenues, but an actual P&L for '23. That's all I have. Thank you.
Trustee Patrick.
Thank you. You had spoken earlier a little bit about more or less the makeup of the Golf Course Commission members, talking about some members Villa Park, some Elmhurst, and how it rotates. Could you do me a favor and explain that a little bit more in depth, but also tell me not just about the breakdown of VP versus Elmhurst, but who those members are and how they were appointed, and is there a stated functionality of the commission?
Yes. So first of all, just to clarify, Matt was the one who, when he started, kind of gave you the rundown of the makeup. It's okay, just to clarify. So, and again, it's very simple, but it's very complicated to explain. 7-member board. It alternates. 1 year Villa Park has 3 and Elmhurst has 4, and then the next year it's the other way around. So every year it changes. 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. In the year that the agency has 4 members, the other agency that has 3 has the chairmanship of the golf course committee. And then the next year, someone drops off this side, someone's added to that side, and then the side with 3 has the chairmanship. So let me just pause. Did that make some sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. And then in terms of the makeup, it's changed a little bit. It seems to me in recent years, but generally the way that it has been, and I'd have to go back and see if the IGA spells this out as a requirement, but it has been one elected official, one representative of the village board or the park board on either side, one staff person, and one member of the community, and then usually the fourth, or I shouldn't say usually, traditionally then the fourth has been another member of the community. I think the village made the decision this year to have Chuck sit on the board, I think, and I'm not sure right now if you're the 4 or the 3, but basically kind of the flexibility with that fourth. But traditionally, it doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but it's been an elected, a staff member, and a member of the community is the 3, kind of the baseline 3, and then a fourth. In the years you have the fourth. And then, and sorry if I may, and then one other point, and then the chair has quote unquote, always been the staff person, because it's, setting up the minutes, or setting up the meetings, running the minutes, doing the agendas, that kind of thing.
Okay. President Kazone, who is currently serving from Villa Park on this commission?
Director Gold, he's got that answer.
So currently, it's Chuck and myself from the staff, and then 2 residents, Joe Colmoni and Kent Johnson.
Who is our elected representative?
We do not have an elected.
So we don't have an elected official representing Villa
Correct.
Park?
Correct.
Okay. So you said we have 2 staff members currently?
Yes.
And then the other 2 are residents?
Yep.
And is that the village president that appoints those?
The board does. Well, the board and I think Kent Johnson was appointed this year.
Yeah, they'll
correct?
fill out an application similar to our commissions.
It came up to the board for approval as a commission member.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
It's specified in section 2-2103 of our code of how we appoint our members.
Okay, any other questions? Trustee Kozar.
Just one quick follow-up, since we were throwing around numbers. So just to be clear, the 2 amounts that are owed, $614,000 is owed to Villa Park, and 1.4 and change is, 1,420,000 and change is owed to Elmhurst. Is that right?
As of 12/31/23, yes.
Right.
Per the audit, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You see where those numbers are in the,
It's the last page.
on the, page 3 of the 5 in the,
I'm showing it on page 5.
Okay, it's
But
also on page.
it's the
also on
right
page-
numbers,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
doesn't matter what page it's on.
Right, that's right. I'm holding the audit,
They
and
match,
those audit
yeah, they
pages,
match,
yes, you
that's
got,
a
you have
good
the
thing.
numbers correct, that's, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, do we have any public comments on tonight's agenda? Okay. Okay, seeing none, we've got a few things that Major Harline and Dr. Gola and Jim will get to us, and we could bring this up for further discussion at a later date. And we have a motion to adjourn. Trustee Kozar, we have a
Motion
second.
to adjourn.
Trustee Patrick, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Okay, so we will adjourn our committee of the whole meeting, and then a regular meeting will commence at 7 o'clock.